Hey everybody, welcome to September. It's time to talk about my wrap up as well as my TBR. So before I begin, why don't you tell me what's something great that you read last month, as well as what is something you plan to read this month? And well, I don't want to spoil it, but why don't you name a book that you did not finish last month, because I have one to talk about for last month. So let us begin though. The first book I read is The Book of Elsewhere by none other than Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. However, Keanu Reeves didn't write a word of this. So my understanding is he had a comic book series called Berserker, and it's featuring the same character, who is an individual who's been alive for 80,000 years. And he's part of this kind of weird underground agency, and he just wants to be mortal. So that is Keanu Reeves' concept. It sounds like he handed it off to Miéville, who actually penned this entire novel. I finished it. What did I think of it? Well, it was good and bad. So on one hand, Miéville is a very accomplished prose stylist. So fantastic prose, pretty much top to bottom. So capable of a diverse set of voices, because what's interesting about this book is that it's split up into sections. So we have the kind of, the immediate story, the stuff featuring a character known as B, the man who has been living for 80,000 years. He's part of this organization, like I said, this order, and he's doing their dirty work. But they're also interested in finding out, how is he immortal? Why is he immortal? And can we harness this power? But interspersed with that main story, and again, this is my favorite part, are these almost journal-like entries. They're typically from first person. However, there are some second person ones that are outlining his past, his origin, whereas the first person ones are from different people from his past. So a servant, a friend, a wife, etc., etc. And what was so cool about it is Miéville took it through the ages. So the very first one seems like the medieval times, and we progress chronologically through his history, focusing on these handful of characters whose paths he has crossed. And it's such a cool way to break up a book because, as you know, most books are just sort of the prose trying to paint a picture in your mind, almost letting you play a film out in your head. And so I'm always fascinated by authors who try new things. They either do things like transcripts, like I talked about with my interview with Kieran Westwood, or something even crazier like House of Leaves. Now, Miéville didn't go too far into Bizarro World. Like I said, they're pretty much just first-person accounts, but it was still such a creative way to break up a normal narrative. Because I hate to say it, the actual story of the novel, the present story of the novel, wasn't that interesting. So as you can see, it's a mixed bag. So do I recommend it? Well, what got me curious is the concept. It sounds like a comic book character, which of course it was. How does that translate to prose? How does that translate to a story that is serious, that is deep with characterization, that feels grounded, that feels real, as opposed to stylized illustrations on a page? It does some good things. It does some bad things, like I said. I shouldn't say bad things, but average things. But as far as a cohesive story, a book that I highly recommend. It's not for everybody. I don't think I could recommend it across the board, but a full review for that book will be coming very soon. So the next book I read was The Drop by Dennis Lehane, and that was recommended by my friend Britton, also known as Some Okie Dude here on YouTube. And I've been bugging him for a long time, hey, I want to read Lehane. Where's a good place to start? And this is the one he recommended. And I have to agree, if you haven't read Lehane yet, this is a great place to start because it's an extremely short book. I think it's like maybe 200 pages long. It's a small story. There's not a large cast of characters. It's something to really, dip your toes in his work and wrap your head around his style of storytelling. And I had a blast. I really enjoyed it. The characterization was fantastic. The prose itself was so fantastic. It has kind of this modern, hard-boiled vibe to it. So many clever things he does with prose that I will definitely talk about my review. So even though I can't completely recommend The Book of Elsewhere, I can completely recommend The Drop by Dennis Lehane. The third book I read was Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. If you didn't know by now, we are doing a complete read-along of the entire Southern Reach trilogy, but then also reading the forthcoming prequel book called Absolution. I just started reading Acceptance last night, so getting ready to make the video very soon. But Authority, it is... it's a little bit different. Well, I should say a lot different from the first book, whereas the first book From the biologist perspective, she was, let's say, emotionally detached from a lot of people, everybody around her. Whereas this one is about a man who is living in the shadow of his mother, who is a, let's say, high up operative in a clandestine organization known as Central and the Southern Reach. But he had a very traumatic childhood because his mother valued her job over family. And so the cool thing about this protagonist named Control, he's called Control because he got it as a nickname when he was a kid from his grandfather. And I think they were pretending to tune in strange things on the radio, control, control. That's where he got it from. But there's subtext to that name because he is not in control. He is anything but in control of a situation now where he's been sent to the Southern Reach to try to figure out what the hell's going on. What have they figured out? What happened to the psychologist who's the ex-director? If you want to follow along with me, go back. We have an entire series. I think it was about 6 episodes if I remember correctly, but this book wasn't quite as strong to me as Annihilation was. Fantastic book all around though, but it wasn't as expertly written, let's say. I felt like Annihilation, you could not remove a word. It was so tightly paced. The characterization was fantastic, even though I know a lot of people disagree with me out there about that. Whereas Authority, I feel like there's some fat you could cut out of it. Still enjoy the book, still love the series. And the funny thing is, a lot of people say they like this book more than Annihilation, which I get partially because it is kind of a change of pace. It's in an office building. There's a lot of this kind of intrigue in air quotes going on, but it didn't quite capture the same magic for me. All right, the fourth and final book. The book that you chose out there, I put this up on a poll. Well, I put a bunch of books on a poll, and this is the one you chose. The Imago, I don't know how to say it. Sequence by Laird Barron. I've heard a lot of good stuff about this. I love cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft, right here on my shelf. My favorite author of all time because he blew my mind with his mythos, his creativity in the realm of horror. So Laird Barron, this book is supposed to be a collection of short stories. Well, it is a collection of short stories, but it's supposed to be reminiscent of kind of Lovecraft's work, not specifically, but the cosmic horror vibe. I bought the audiobook and the Kindle book because I like to kind of go back and forth sometimes. So I listened to the first story in my car, finished it in one drive. And I told myself, I said, I had to have missed something. I had to have missed something because it's not that I didn't get the story. It's like I was hoping for more weight to it, some eerie little things that I feel like Lovecraft does well. So Lovecraft clearly sucks at characterization. He sucks at creating page turners, right? His prose is so dense and flowery. But what Lovecraft excels at and why I keep going back to his work is the atmosphere. It's the building of the dread. It's the building of the mystery. It's exploring the horrors of the unknown, as he calls it. So that's kind of what I was hoping for with this book. So anyway, I listened to the first story. I said, you know what? Let me go back and read it. I went back and read it and I still didn't get it. No worries. Not every short story in a collection is that great. So I read the second one. Same thing. I read the third one. Same thing. So I'm going to do probably a video about this. I got about 60% through this book. I think I only had 2 or 3 stories left in the entire collection before I had to throw in the towel, before I had to say, you know what? I don't get it. So if you guys out there who voted on this one, please let me know in the comments, what am I missing? What am I not getting? Is there one story that I just have to read? Is the titular story that I have to read? I don't know. But man, oh man, I'll tell you what, these stories were damn near impossible to get through. Laird Barron is great at a certain kind of writing. However, that certain kind of writing is populated throughout all of these stories, regardless of the character, regardless of his or her background. They all sound the same. They all sound like a hard-boiled kind of hard ass, which is fine. I love that kind of voice, but it's got to fit the character. Another thing he does is he kind of just gives me a bunch of bullshit. He just talks about a bunch of stuff that really doesn't matter, that doesn't feel like it's leading to anywhere, doesn't feel like it's building the dread, which is, again, that's what I love about horror. That's what I love about cosmic horror. And by the time I got to the end of these stories, I wasn't just in awe of like, oh man, I feel so insignificant, like Lovecraft makes me feel when I read his stories. But anyway, I'll probably do a video discussing my full thoughts and why I stopped reading this book. And I apologize because I know you guys out there, you wanted me to read this. You wanted me to do a review on it. I'm not going to do a full review on it, clearly, because I didn't finish it. I really tried. I swear I really tried. But I will do a video explaining why I did not finish it. Let us move on to my TBR this month. Well, so if you are new to this channel, you may not know that I did a read along of one of Adam Neville's books, and that was called The Vessel. I haven't had an old lady face when I did those videos. But anyway, I knew Adam Neville from his film called The Ritual. Well, his novel, The Ritual, which was adapted to the film, The Ritual. I haven't read that book. I saw the movie. I thought it was okay. I love folk horror. The ending didn't really amount to anything. So I thought it was time to revisit Neville. Well, actually, another YouTuber who I will not disclose because it's going to turn into a video, messaged me and said, hey, would you like to read this book and then, have a video and talk about it? Which I've done, of course, many times on my channel. And I thought, hell yeah, why not? And she recommended this book. And I said, you know what? Since I haven't read Adam Neville in some time, I figured maybe it was time to get back to his work and check it out. So the book is Last Days. It's a big, beefy boy. I think it's over 500 pages long or something like that. But I'm being cautiously optimistic because The Vessel, not a fan. The Ritual, so much I enjoyed about it, but the ending, not so much. This one did win the British Fantasy Award for Horror in the year it was published. So I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic. So we'll see how that goes. Last Days by Adam Neville. The next book I'm going to read is probably one no one's heard of, unless you're a story nerd like me. It is by a man named Tim Grahl, who is the CEO of StoryGrid, which is a company, but they put out a book many years ago that's been highly influential with my understanding of storytelling. But this book, great title, it's called The Shithead. This is an art copy, actually, I got. And I got to put a review out by September 19th. Well, Goodreads, Amazon. Doesn't have to be a video review, but I'll probably do a video review. But anyway, this book, The Shithead, it seems somewhat autobiographical because I know Tim Grahl from his podcast with a StoryGrid where he worked with Sean Coyne, who's an editor with 30 years traditional publishing experience and extremely knowledgeable in storytelling. And anyway, on the podcast, Tim wasn't really a writer yet. He didn't understand story. He tried to write, he'd written stories in the past, but never anything that he was truly happy with. And so he called up Sean Coyne and he said, hey man, do you want to do a podcast or do you want to just get on a call with me really quick? And I want to pick your brain about some stuff. And then they had a long conversation, which turned into a podcast, which turned into Tim Grahl becoming the CEO of StoryGrid. Yeah, he talked his way into that thing. They're a publishing house. Stephen Pressfield, also the famous author of the Gates of Fire and Bagger Vance and a bunch of other ones. Sean Coyne has always been his editor. So there is a lot of clout behind this publisher. But I want to read this book because I'm fascinated to see if all of the things they preach result in a fantastic novel. Tim Grahl put a video out on it. I'll link it down below. And you can grab an arc for yourself if you're interested. He says he's extremely proud of it. I'm excited to read it. It's basically about a guy who runs a marketing firm. He's drowning in debt, but he gets an opportunity. Some guy wants him to market actually a politician, which is something out of his wheelhouse. I know it sounds ordinary. It sounds boring. I've already started the book and I'll tell you right now, the prose flies, the scene construction is fantastic. So far, they are practicing, or Tim is practicing what he preaches and what he learned from Sean Coyne. But The Shithead, that is the second book I'm going to read this month of September. The third book should be no surprise to anybody out there who's watching the channel. That is Acceptance by Jeff Vandermeer, the final book in the Southern Reach trilogy. Well, minus the prequel, of course. So why am I excited about this one? Well, the first two novels were single POV. This one is 3 POVs. Actually, technically 4, I think. This is when the entire story comes together, when we understand the significance of the biologist, Control, the psychologist, the lighthouse keeper, and whether or not it culminates into a satisfying conclusion. It does, at least for me. But that is the third book, and you guys know how it is around here. What is the fourth book I'm going to read? And I promise you, well, I shouldn't say I promise you, but I will try my best to not quit the book like I did the Imago sequence, because man, I went into that one really wanting to love it. So excited to read it. And then when I got into it, it was weird. It was kind of like, being a kid wanting a new Nintendo or a Sega for Christmas, and you just knew your parents were going to get it for you. And you see the box under the tree and you're like, that's the right size. And you go over there and you open it up and it's like a toy truck or something. That's kind of how I felt reading the Imago sequence by Laird Barron. But as always, you guys comment down below a suggestion for what you'd like to read. Also, people upvote it. You don't have to put a title down there, but if you like someone else's suggestion, upvote it, because I'm going to take the top 4, only 4 of those, put them in a poll, and then whichever book wins in that poll will be the 4th and final book I will read this month of September. But that is it. I'm extremely excited to find out what you guys want me to read this month, because you guys always surprise me. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and get your votes in down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.